Hello and welcome to this important conversation about how to support employees through their cancer journey. I'm really delighted that you're joining the conversation today, which is being hosted in partnership with our fantastic team at Reframe Cancer. And we're really delighted that you're here to listen in and watch the discussion. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we'll be sharing practical advice from our expert panel about how to create a supportive work environment for those who are impacted by cancer. As always, please do pop in your comments and questions into the comments section, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go through the conversation or at the end of it. So without further ado, let's meet our expert panel. First of all, Mark Stephenson is the CEO of Reframe Cancer. Mark, thanks so much for sparing the time to talk with us today.
Thanks, Jane. Looking forward to it.
Suzanne Steed is a cancer nurse specialist with Reframe Cancer. Suzanne, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jane. Thank you.
And finally, my wonderful colleague here at Raiys, Craig Lewis, who is our Wellness Director. Craig, thanks again for joining us.
Pleasure.
So perhaps I could start by just asking everybody really to give a little bit of background about the work that we do in this space. Mark, tell us a little bit about Reframe Cancer and the work that you do.
Yeah, I'll try my best. I mean, Suzanne can do a way better job than I can because Suzanne is the one who's dealing with patients and employees. So basically, we work with insurers, brokers, wellness advisors, or directly with some employers, for instance, the likes of Salesforce and Meta, helping their employees all the way through the cancer journey. So that could be right at the start, from prevention through screening, speeding up diagnosis, and then all the way through the different treatment phases, of which there can be many. And whilst we're doing that, we're trying to help the employee if they want to work, if they want to stay at work, how they can do that as well. And then a crucial part of any journey for a patient who's working is that return to work, which is often the most difficult part as well. So all the way through the cancer pathway.
Thanks, Mark. And Suzanne, your background was actually delivering chemotherapy treatment, wasn't it, as a nurse in a hospital, and now you're with Reframe Cancer. So tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you do with individuals.
Yeah, so I've got over 20 years of experience as a qualified nurse. I did my surgical nursing as well. And then I went on to, after qualifying, to do a specialist chemotherapy course. So I looked after patients on an inpatient ward and an outpatient administering chemotherapy. But probably most importantly, sort of hearing about the side effects that they're coping with and what they're dealing with and what the struggles are, what the worries are, whether it's financial or the children or, the future. So it's really good to be able to bring all that experience to work at Reframe and support our patients on a really individualized basis and find out what really matters to them and give them specific support whilst they're going through diagnosis and treatment and the survivorship period. And as Mark said, hopefully getting back to work, which is really important.
Oh, thanks, Suzanne. And we'll be tapping into that expertise and what you've learned through that during this conversation. And Craig, perhaps you could tell the audience a little bit about what we do at Raiys to support people in the workplace around this important issue.
Yeah, no, thanks. So, I mean, we've got quite a broad support. So very much in the preventative, proactive space, which I think we'll talk a bit more about later on, but also support around testing and screening for cancer conditions. And then thinking about, obviously, habits within the workplace and outside of the workplace, which can help in terms of, the prevention element, but also if there are existing health conditions, we know lifestyle is crucial. So we provide a range of support. It could be around things like sun awareness and UV radiation. It could be around the impact of diet and nutrition and obviously physical activities. So yeah, quite a broad element, but the role of sort of cancer in the workplace and the support, I think, is an area that we're really interested in developing over time as well.
Oh, brilliant. So let's sort of start the main part of the conversation then, Mark, by looking at some of the statistics that Reframe have gathered around why it's so important that businesses and organisations are much more cancer aware. Can you sort of talk us through some of the statistics that you've uncovered?
Yeah, will do. And even before I get into these statistics, I think Lord Darcy's report into the NHS has been really useful and really important to put a spotlight on cancer. So unfortunately, the UK is one of the worst in Europe on mortality. We're the worst of the G7, and again, one of the worst in the world. And that's not because treatment is any worse in the UK, it's because we pick up people too late. So over 45% of people are picked up in stage 3 or stage 4 of cancer, and it's just too late. That is the UK's issue, and that's why I'm passionate that employers can do so much more to help this and help people pick up cancer earlier through either prevention or symptoms or screening or whatever it might be, allowing people to go and have the NHS screening. There's a lot can be done. So let's talk through some of these. I'll start putting that in context because it is important to understand.
Absolutely, no, it's very, very important, and we will definitely talk a lot more about that a little bit later on as well. Definitely.
So there's some of the stats that everyone knows. 1 in 2 of us will get cancer before we die. I think everyone knows that stat. Probably some of these others are not so well known. So the prevalence rate, that's the number of people who've got cancer, either diagnosed or they're living with cancer, is up to 3.6%. That was 3% in 2020. So this has really shot up in the last few years, and this is something that we all need to understand. Cancer is growing so quickly, and unfortunately, it's growing at its quickest in the younger people. So the age group 20, this is the plus 22%. The age group 25 to 50, and that number is 5 years out of date. It's now growing at double the speed in 25 to 50 than the older age group. That is causing a lot of people alarm, and it's really worrying. In fact, if you look at that figure on a global basis, it's growing 79%. That it's grown from 1990 to 2020. That is a real worry for everyone, and we'll probably cover it later. But there are different thoughts and reasons why people are thinking that's happening. And actually, looking at prevention, there's different numbers, whether it's 4 in 10 or 3 in 10 of cancers could be preventable, but they could be. That's around diet, obviously not smoking, fitness. There's a load of things that can be done to actually reduce the chance of you actually getting cancer in the first place. Looking at the working age population, that's 160,000 people a year are being diagnosed with cancer. Again, that has shot up a lot to where it used to be, especially with the younger people getting cancer. You've also got over a million people are at work who've had cancer, so they're in remission. And then you've got, and this is a number that we're trying to, I've seen different numbers here. I've seen this over 2 million, but I think it's around about 1.5 million people are actually caring for someone with cancer. So this could be a relative or a loved one, and that is causing them a lot of time. Often those people don't have any PMI in place, going through the NHS, very, very hard to manage. So when you combine those numbers together, it's actually 1 in 16 people at work have either being diagnosed with cancer, living in remission, or are caring for someone with cancer. That's probably a lot higher than a lot of people realise. Yeah,
so that is so important then to be talking about this subject and making employers aware of what they can do and why they should be doing it, importantly. So let's move on from that and perhaps pick up a little bit there on the sort of individual journey that somebody might take in the workplace. Suzanne, perhaps you can sort of tell us from your experience about the point about that sort of point where you get diagnosed, then treatment, and then the outcome, which could either be, return to work or might end up being palliative and terminal. What is an individual likely to go through? I know it's very difficult to broadly generalise, isn't it? Because as we've already said, and Mark said, it's a personal journey. But is there a kind of rough pathway that you can plot for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. Cancer is, almost an umbrella term really for so many different subsets, from anything from head and neck and tonsils cancer down to bowel cancer. So it really is very varied, and I think employers obviously do need to understand it's a very individualized journey. However, there's always going to be certain points where there are sort of touch points where people do need a bit more support at that time. So I'd say even before diagnosis, at the pre-diagnosis stage, people might have found a lump or a bump or have symptoms they're worried about, and if they're working, that can, you know, their probably mind's not on their work at that point. They're waiting for a test result or something. So they might probably still will be working at that point, but they might just be rather anxious or, you know, forgetful. If they could be at that point pointed in the direction of somebody they can confide in confidentially, that would be the, you know, the ideal really for every employer, because at that point you can start talking about what benefits they could even start tapping into at that point. You know, if there's any PMI or employee funded programs, a private GP or something they could use, then that could benefit them at that stage. But then, yes, coming on to the diagnosis, obviously, you know, it's unimaginable when you're told you've got cancer, your world falls apart. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a waiting time between treatment as well, which I think people want to get started straight away, but there's always got to be a time when they're clarifying the pathology results. There'll be an MDT, so they've got to wait for people to decide what the best outcomes of treatment plan is going to be. So having that emotional support at that time is probably the most important thing. Again, if there's any employee programs that can speed any of that up, it can, but there generally is a waiting time to treatment. They'll have lots of questions, maybe needing a bit of time off work from further tests, further biopsies, investigations. So the employee can be understanding at that point about giving time off work, you know, having somebody to be by their side at work, a colleague, or whether it's their line manager or somebody in HR, just to tell them that, you know, we're here for you. And they'll have worries about financial issues, maybe if they're going to be off sick, how long they're going to be off sick for. This does all come into play sometimes right at the point of diagnosis. So you sort of have to try and relax that person and go through things one by one and just reassure them that, you know, their job is safe, they will have time off, and they'll get the support they need. And then obviously going through the treatment stage, well, that's, you know, a lot of physical implications there. Some people you might not know have actually got cancer. They can continue working, depending on the severity, of course, but will just need time off for appointments. Lots of treatments these days could actually be in tablet form, so they might not necessarily have to have time off to go for infusions. If they are having to have time off, of course, you know, for example, if somebody's got breast cancer, then they're going to be having treatment once a month at least, and then the following week they're really not going to feel well enough to work, so physically might need to have that time off. But in between that, they might be able to negotiate, you know, shorter working hours or working from home. So there is a lot employers can do to support that person to remain at work, or maybe even changing the job role. You know, we work with people that are out on the field and doing lots of driving, or engineers, for example. So that might not be appropriate at that point, because they might need to have, you know, access to bathroom facilities or hot food, for example. They could be at risk of infection because their immunity will be affected. So, you know, cross-infection is really important. So maybe working from home, maybe changing the job role, maybe giving them an office job. They'll also probably feel quite fatigued. So perhaps not traveling during the rush hour, maybe coming in later, you know, starting late, finishing early. Making sure there's time for breaks, maybe cutting down on long meetings. If they're having any treatment that's affecting their voice or their speech, then if they've got a customer-facing role, then that's not really going to be appropriate for a while. So they might just have to have a temporary drop, you know, change of role. Okay. And then obviously, hopefully, after all that treatment and they are getting better, they're going to need a bit of recovery time. But if they have had time off, it's really good for the employer to keep in touch whilst they're off, so they don't feel out of the loop. You know, maybe have the occasional email. They probably still want to know what's happening at work, so that when they do come back, it's not all completely alien. Or they might actually just need a complete break. So again, it's really down to that personalised intervention and finding out what is appropriate for that person at the time. Maybe
there is a legal responsibility as well, Suzanne, isn't there, with this?
Yes,
as well,
yeah.
Reasonable adjustments.
Yeah, and actually more employees are becoming aware of their rights under sort of the Equality Act, Human Rights Act. They are protected to have reasonable adjustments made at work. So, you know, quite rightly so, it is their human right really to be able to work in a safe environment. So yeah, employers are becoming aware of that as well. So do need to make those adjustments for them.
So Craig, as somebody who's previously managed sort of wellbeing support within a large and distributed workforce yourself, before your time at Raiys, there are so many different issues coming into play here, aren't they? But at the centre of it is somebody that just needs that individual support and to know that the employer is with them.
Yeah, I think individual support is crucial, and options, isn't it, in terms of, having those presented at an appropriate time, but also options can then cause uncertainty in choice. And I think a lot of it is the dynamic and the relationships between the individual and their colleagues at work or line management. So yeah, the support for the individual is key, but I know, Mark and Suzanne do a great job obviously supporting the colleagues of the individual and just reassuring them that, what their role is, how they can help. I think a lot of us were just apprehensive about doing the wrong thing, aren't we? And often we're worried about doing the wrong thing, so we decide to do nothing, which can then exacerbate the situation. So I think that increasing that transparency and having, obviously, working on clear policies and procedures and just raising awareness is the key thing, isn't it? You don't have to provide all the information immediately, but if people know this is where I can go to get support, and the earlier they have that information, the better, really. So yeah, those are some of the key conversations that we tend to have and have had previously.
You're right, Craig. No, sorry, I was just going to say that lots of employees don't know what benefits they have until they really need them. So if they can be reminded of them by their HR person or line manager, that's really helpful. They haven't got time to start searching around, so that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, the sad truth is that a lot of employees don't actually tell their employer. They don't tell them early. They maybe don't have a great relationship with their employer. There's all sorts of things that could come into play here, aren't there?
Yeah, sadly, this is very true, and that it's good there's been so much research done on this now, that so many employees hold back that they've got a cancer diagnosis, or they're concerned about in getting a cancer diagnosis, and they're going through all that stress those weeks beforehand. And I think, when you compare to mental health, the massive strides that have been made on mental health by so many employers, I really feel that cancer is lagging behind. And you can see this backed up by some of these stats, that 55% withholding that they're going through, that they've started their cancer journey until they receive a confirmed diagnosis. That's a lot of people that are just not coming forward and doing that. And we've got 11% of just not declaring anything at all. And Suzanne will know this, we have some employees that we work with, and we absolutely respect their confidence, who just don't want their employer to know. And they will do everything they can. They'll be taking holiday time off to try and get through their cancer journey without people knowing.
And why is that, Mark? Why is it? Why won't they disclose?
I think people still feel stigmatized with cancer. I think people are worried about promotion. They're worried about what people are going to think. They're worried about people saying the wrong thing back to them. And this is why it's so important that if there was more of an open culture around cancer, and the employers were talking about it on a front foot rather than on a back foot basis, having, sharing cancer days, all the things that go on. I think if there was that, and we certainly see that from the employers that get this better, there is this really open culture. There's good training for the managers and for the HR teams. And then I think it's more likely people will come forward. I think there's actually a likelihood it will shorten their journey, because of that support is given earlier in the pathway, and people are given time off and given understanding. They'll probably get through the journey quicker. And if you look at it from a cost perspective, we shouldn't. But then the company can save money as well. Hopefully everyone will be doing this for the right reasons. But that's another reason to look at it as well.
Yeah, and Suzanne, you were sort of nodding there, but one thing is, you can't always maybe tell when somebody's going through a cancer journey. They might not have obvious signs that they're going through it as well, which again maybe makes the employee less likely to say anything, or a manager to realise that they're going through this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of employees feel that they don't want to be treated differently. As I say, with the stigma, but actually they do deserve to be treated differently, but not in a negative way, in a positive way. And as Mark said, exactly, if people around them know what they're going through, I think they'd be surprised at how much support they could get. And as you say, the risk of infection and things, if they need to be off at certain points or have time off to rest and relax and recover, then their next treatment will be on time. Whereas if they're stressing and pushing themselves too much, then they might not be able to actually have the next lot of chemo. So it'd be delayed a month. So it could actually extend the time, in the long term, that they're actually out of work anyway.
Yeah, and Craig, I guess if you're a colleague of somebody who's going through this and maybe hasn't had the confidence or a reason to disclose it, you're going to feel terrible when you find out that that's what they've been through and you weren't actually able to provide them with the support potentially that might have helped them, make that journey in a much more positive way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're obviously going to question what you've probably been saying to your colleague or your employee, but also you'll then reflect on that and the relationship in the future as well, isn't it? And I think it's fair to say employees are the most valuable resource of any organization. So the more support that we can provide, the better the conditions. And probably, again, with Suzanne and Mark's experience, that there's not going to be a perfect solution. But if, I suppose, every occurrence of cancer in the workplace is handled, shall we say, 10, 20, 30% better, those marginal improvements are going to, and obviously one situation that's handled well, that could then cause another colleague in the future to be much more open. So it can have that sort of cumulative effect. So yeah, I think, you're right. If as a manager you feel that you've not provided support or you're lacking information, that could alter the relationship, in the future and then hamper the sort of the progress. So yeah, it's a difficult topic, but I think we've made real strides in other areas such as mental health and other physical health conditions. And I mean, I've got my own personal experience. I came across a colleague early on in my career who was really open about testicular cancer, and it just became so normalized, and it was almost then, it meant that other conversations could be much easier, and it then made it, if I came across somebody else, at least I've had experience of dealing with that situation.
And actually that opens up the conversation, doesn't it, Suzanne, in terms of raising awareness about a particular type of cancer. So other people might be encouraged to actually go and get a test if they're also worried about that thing. So even the sort of communication between the manager and the employee, well, that's important. That there's a wider conversation that might be prompted by this that helps the workplace in general, and particularly maybe men in the workplace who may be a little bit more reluctant to talk about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, screening and testing early is obviously really important. And if employers can offer any sort of early test or screening test, then that is really, it encourages their employees to actually go take up the test, but also it shows they're caring about cancer. And then if so, the employees will know it's on their manager's agenda. So if they do get diagnosed, then they'll feel more comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
And of course, as you mentioned, have the peer support. If other people have been through it, then they're more open and they know who they can talk to, and have more of a sort of support network around them.
So moving on from that, the fact is, Mark, that most people that have a cancer diagnosis actually want to carry on working, don't they? They want to be at work. They want to be busy. They want to carry on doing the thing that has filled their life previously.
Absolutely, they do, and I think most oncologists we work with would recommend that as well. Then it's easy to say, it's not so easy to do, because as what Suzanne was pointing out earlier, they might not be at 100% for whatever reason, especially through the treatment they're going through. So making reasonable workplace adjustments then has to be what everyone looks at. But the vast majority of people do want to carry on working, and it is good for them to do that. I don't know, some employers I've made the mistake before. When I look back on my career, I've said, "Oh, just let them be at home. It's fine. We'll look after them." That's not actually what people want to hear. They want to hear that they can carry on as best they can.
And that keeping in touch as well, Craig. We sort of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but making sure that the employee doesn't feel isolated if they are having to take time away from work, that they're still in touch, that people are contacting them, that they feel part of what's going on still. Yeah.
Also, in terms of the situation, could probably change week to week, month to month. So by having regular contact, you can sort of tailor the advice and the plan. And also, I think, Mark's comment about being sort of sat at home, you're missing potentially access to an amazingly valuable resource, and to know that you've had that conversation where if something crops up, can we reach out to you? Or if you're at home and you are sort of, going through treatment, you suddenly think of a great idea or something that's been bothering you, but by going back to work, you don't want to sort of say, well, because I've reached out and I've given information, it's opened up the floodgates a little bit as well. So I think the two-way communication and having regular touch points in place, so there is a space created for those conversations rather than just relying on the employee or the employer reaching out.
If we just chip in, I'm going to go over to Suzanne, but I think a really good example is someone going through rounds of chemo, that there are particular days that they probably can't work and other days they can. And it's getting a cycle going. It can be really useful. And Suzanne's can comment on that far better than
I was also going to say there, Mark, as well. We were speaking to somebody because on our digital platform, we have lots of people talking about their lived experience. And we've got a number of people who've shared their experience around having cancer. And there's also that thing, talking to a single mum the other day who, managed her work hours around being able to drop her son at school, then get her treatment in the morning and then work in the afternoon. So there's that part of the flexibility as well, isn't there? And Suzanne, obviously you've talked a lot. You mentioned earlier that you obviously have heard what people are worried about when they're going through all this. Can you share some of the kind of worries and concerns that people that are still trying to work have when they're going through this?
Yeah, of course. I was just going to say also, when we're talking about the sort of people's identity of working, we've got a lot of, a good skill base out there. And one of my patients previously was actually a doctor himself, and he actually had incurable cancer, but he's managed to carry on working for many years. And we need that talent to carry on. He's a surgeon, we want people like him and many other people to continue being a valuable contribution to society as well. So it's sort of, the bigger picture as well. Everybody's important, and it's, everyone's skills and talents. You want them to be able to continue using those. It's part of their identity as well. But yes, obviously, everyone has different things they're worried about. Like you said about a young mum, the school run, losing hair obviously is a really big issue for lots of people. So they really need support on that. Whether there's things they can do like wearing the cold cap during treatment, for example, to try and prolong hair loss. Sorting out wigs beforehand. We talk a lot about prehab as well. So we'll try and get people prepared before they go into treatment. So I think that's something that everyone can do is, thinking about while you're still feeling well, what you can put in place to cope with these side effects. It's family is generally a big one that people are worried about if they've got, children, or even if they might be a carer themselves, they might be looking after parents. So that's another issue, how they're going to, who's going to do that if they're having treatment and not feeling well. But the side effects, head and neck patients, for example, with head and neck cancer, one of the main issues that affects them is their eating and drinking. And obviously that is the most, basic part of our life. It's essential, but it's also a social part of our life. So that's being aware of the symptoms and side effects that people are going through, and how that's not just a physical impact, but a psychological impact is really important. Their appearance will change, obviously. Weight loss, hair loss, skin.
And if they had surgery, particularly for a woman, if she's ended up having a mastectomy, I know a lot of women are worried about how they'll be perceived if they're wearing, something that reveals that and if they haven't had breast enhancement afterwards. So there's so many things to think about. And Craig, there's also the fact that it might not be you going through it, but your partner or somebody is going through it, and that's impacting your work because you're worried about them, or you actually need to take time off to go with them to appointments and be supportive of them as well.
Yeah, you mentioned about the individual being affected, but it's that group around that person as well, whether it's their younger children, which again could be an impact on in terms of the school relationship. I know pastoral care at schools is great and improving all the time, and then it could be aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and Mark's point about that 25 to 49 age group, the sort of the sandwich generation, isn't it, where you have commitments to sort of children, and then you've got maybe commitments towards elderly parents as well. To then have a cancer diagnosis, it's a massive ask for that individual to deal with that. And that's where the support structure, and clearly people will be leaning on their partner or their relatives more or less, depending on the situation. And again, I think that's where having support for the partner, for example, and knowing that they can have the conversation, because sometimes it might be the individual, you've probably seen it, so the individual actually copes with it amazingly well, but it's the surrounding group that really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes they put themselves last, and they're more worried about how other people are affected, and how the children are going to react, or brothers, sisters. I mean, also going slightly off track, but obviously some cancers we know are hereditary or in the family. So if one person's diagnosed, then they might have to tell their brothers and sisters or children that they've got to have gene testing. That's obviously another a whole new topic, but it's genetic testing is a really, really sort of advancing area at the moment, and it's quite often recommended that family members get tested. So yes, they've then got to think, oh gosh, I've got to break this news, and not only am I being treated, but they now might be vulnerable.
Mark, we've sort of been talking, I guess, from a perspective of an employer that might have, HR teams and support teams that are able to take the time to do this and make those reasonable adjustments. But how hard is it for smaller businesses where there maybe aren't those resources to try and help somebody through this journey?
I think it's genuinely really hard, because I've worked in big corporates, some brilliant HR people who can support you. They've often had experience of going through something like this before. In a small business, and it's your first employee with cancer, it is incredibly difficult. And so I'm not trying to sell what we do, but I think you need someone like us to help you through that. So I'm not trying to be commercial here, but I think that expertise that you would go out in any other area, you go out to external lawyers or external HR help or whatever else in a small business. Why wouldn't you do the same if someone's got cancer? It is complex to manage. People do need a lot of support, and especially in a small business, that impact can be so much bigger. So I would suggest that there are other companies out there, apart from myself. There are options. Go and speak to one of these companies. It doesn't cost too much, and get that support and help.
Yeah, well, let's look at the next slide, the final slide that we've got, actually, because that kind of follows on from the conversation of the sort of cost of not doing anything. Like you said, Mark, it has a financial impact as well on your business, and businesses want to be able to perform and be profitable. But this can actually create a problem, can't it?
Absolutely. So if you look at both sides of this slide, if you look on the left-hand side, this is a retention issue. So you've got 11% of people. This is from a survey we did of 500 employees. You said the support was so bad that they were going to leave. That's and so many companies have got retention issues. That's not something you want. You actually want it the other way around, where people are so happy about the support they've been given that they tell all their colleagues, which is not that's the result you want, not this one. And of those 11%, 75% of them are younger people. So again, this is not good. Probably the talent you're bringing through. These are the last set of people that you want to leave. And then on the right-hand side, this is the actual time that people are taking off. And I think this is something that's missed. So on average, people are taking 75 days off work with cancer. And I don't think people realize it's quite as big, as large as that. And that's because it's staggered over the different areas of the pathway. So you can see below, it's quite evenly staggered from the earlier part all the way through treatment. And this is what people miss. It's that earlier part and the recovery part that actually is as bad as going through treatment. People think it's just through treatment. So when you add that up with the 75 days, the amount of people that are diagnosed with cancer, over 10% of UK absence is down to cancer. And yes, everyone's talking about MSK and doing a lot of good work around that, mental health doing a lot of good work around that. It's as though cancer just got forgotten, and it shouldn't be. And actually, one of the things that Suzanne and all the other great CNSs have, we try and reduce that. We try and help wherever we can to reduce those days. Just chasing results up. A lot of it's all back. It's almost back to the cycling team themselves. The Sky cycling team. All those marginal gains. That's what we're trying to do. We can chop a day out here, chop a day out there. That can make a massive difference to anyone's cancer journey, and that's something that we try. We're not Suzanne would say this: we're not miracle workers, but we can help a little bit quicker through the journey.
Yeah, and we've got a question from Sean here. Thanks, Sean, for watching. He's just asking, does PMI, which private medical insurance, sort of adequately cover cancer treatment and care if you are in an organisation where you've got access to that?
So I always have to be very careful how I answer this. So the PMI companies do a great job of supporting people from the point they pick up, which for some of them is quite late in diagnosis and then through treatment, and they'll organise that treatment for you and they'll do a good job. But they don't have the wraparound of someone like Suzanne. So we will have the same. You'll have Suzanne all the way through your journey. So that holistic support, managing all those other aspects, which is so important, that doesn't exist in PMI. So yes, they're good. They're good. You know, once they pick you up, sorting out the diagnosis for you and organising the treatment. But I'd say they probably don't do half of what needs to be done to help people through. So I think a lot of companies think we've got PMI. The other thing I would say with PMI, 87% of employees haven't got PMI. What about them? So I think, you know, if we're all going to look at this and look at it in the right way, I think we have to look at the whole of the workforce. It shouldn't just be for the C-suite.
Yeah, and Craig, it comes back again to this sort of having somebody there that's supporting you right the way through the journey. So again, that manager who maybe has got time to really give you that personal support and point you in the right direction, even if they can't deliver the sort of expert specialist support that Suzanne would be giving to a patient, an employee going through this. Just being a manager who cares and, you know, is interested and is there by your side to answer any questions is super important, isn't it?
You can't really put a price on sort of the reassurance aspect, knowing that you've got something in place. And although it may not be as used as much as you think it would be, and then you're into the conversation around, you know, the usage and the stats and the return on investment, but just having that peace of mind that we as an organization, or me as a line manager, I've got tools in place to help support my colleagues, whatever they might come to bring to me. And then I think it's that development as a manager. So if I'm a manager, you know, early in my career and I've got experience of this, then as I progress and move up into more senior roles, I've then got the ability to influence maybe wider decisions around budget and usage. So I think, you know, obviously all managers, it would be really important for them to know about the support and the services and cancer support in the workplace. But I suppose that cohort in their early 20s and early 30s, we're thinking about a generational change, aren't we?
Yeah. And those young people that we're talking about and the increase in incidence of cancer in young people, Suzanne, is something that really managers need to be aware of now, that it's not just people getting towards the end of their career that are being affected by this. It's happening much, much earlier on.
Yes, it is. And I think, you know, even when I was nursing, even sort of 10 years ago, you'd have people coming in saying, oh, I've got this lump bump. And we'd be saying, oh, don't worry, you're far too young for it to be cancer, you know. And I think, yes, you know, our eyes have been opened in the last 10 to 20 years of the increase that's happening, obviously due to, you know, many factors. But those people, they're young and they're fit. They're more likely to have a good outcome if they get through the, you know, the right treatment as well. And it's amazing how many employees you speak to who are really loyal to their company, like Mark was saying earlier, because they've either got our service or they've got PMI or they've got counsellors, they've got some, or even an understanding employee. If they haven't got all those benefits, they've got somebody that actually has got time to listen to them, you know, reaches out to their family, gives them that care. It's amazing how much impact that has and how they feel loyal to that company to go back. You know, we've had one lady that actually had just handed her notice in when she was diagnosed, and her employer said, that's fine, you can stay with us, because she then realized she'd lose all her benefits. So they actually rescinded the resignation, supported her through her treatment. And of course, now she's gone back to work with them, and she's got no intention of leaving now because she was so impressed with the care and support that they gave her.
And then that ripples then to her colleagues as well, who know that if they've come across they go through something similar, they're going to get good support. So that knowledge, that culture, that environment in the workplace is so important, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And as I say, younger people especially do, they do know their rights. They'll sometimes choose a job depending on, how good the employer is now. It's not just about what you want to do. They'll look at how well they're looked after in the workplace. Because we all know now it's a quality of life balance, work-life balance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And good for them for standing up for their rights as well. It's something that our generation could have learned about a little bit earlier. Talking about prevention, Craig, this is a kind of area that I know we do a lot of work in, but that awareness raising within an organisation, and as Mark was saying, the importance of catching cancers early wherever possible is important as well. So it's not just about the helping the person once they've got a diagnosis. It's that bit that you can do as an employer before that, isn't it, Craig, as to what can you do in the workplace to kind of raise more awareness and help people get screened if they don't have access.
Yeah, I mean, prevention is key and crucial, and it is the area that I've particularly focused on in my career. But the numbers are too significant that people are going to slip through the gap, or even if you've got the best lifestyle in the world, you can still suffer a diagnosis. So when you see the figures like 3 in 10, 4 in 10, that's really encouraging and really reassuring. But there is obviously then going to be other areas where the lifestyle doesn't impact. You've got the genetic influence as well, or just unknown why it's happened. And I think there are certain jobs where there is an increased risk of cancer from that job, whether it's outdoor workers and sun exposure, whether it's exposure to chemicals, and that's where we get into the occupational health space. And I think there's a really good dynamic between occupational health support, HR, and services like Reframe Cancer as well. And then I think you mentioned about the rehabilitation. There's some fantastic support available through particularly cancer rehab specialists in the exercise space, the nutrition space as well. So being able to be geared towards that, because probably some people may have been mentioned that, this is something that you could have after your treatment, but unless it's really promoted the benefits of that and the difference it can make as well. And obviously, Suzanne, I'm sure those are things that you just hammer home in terms of use this recovery. So I think already I had to look at very much the prevention element, and then I suppose it's the impact of lifestyle afterwards, and that bit in the middle with the treatment is obviously where we leave it to the specialist. But if you've got somebody, an advocate, there, and Suzanne, I think you mentioned that you will sometimes attend meetings, won't you, where you just help the individual to understand the results and any questions, and be there to relay back later on. That's something that I thought was really interesting.
Yes, we do. We can attend a second opinion or attend an appointment with our patients, because obviously the medical jargon quite often goes over people's heads, or you only take in about 50% of what's told to you at that point anyway. So we can take notes, and if we don't actually attend the appointment, we can also, patients will send us their clinical summary letter, and we can help go through that with them so they understand what they're talking about. If it's for example, a breast cancer that's HER2 and PR negative, what does that mean? We can explain what it means and what effect that will have on the treatment. Yeah.
And then Mark, there's that piece again, the awareness piece. I know you were talking about it almost right at the start, that it's so important that we talk about more openly about cancer in the workplace in order to try and get that terrible UK record that we've got improved in years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give some tips to people. I think there's 4 things I can look at. Just supporting cancer awareness prevention initiatives, and there's cancer days, there's cancer months. Just get on top of them and support them. People like Cancer Research UK and Macmillan do some brilliant work around this. Engage with that as well. We do it as well, but I'll reference them. I think some basic training for managers, what to say, and to encourage people. Go and encourage people to go and have the NHS screening tests that are there, that they're available, they're free. Encourage people to do that. Offering and communicating the support that is available. So often people have got EAP schemes, other schemes in place. As Suzanne said, just reference what's there and what's available. Companies are paying good money for these schemes. Communicate them, and this collaborative support as well. Just that so line managers, HR teams, everyone's working together to get across that they're there to support people, and if they do come forward, that they will absolutely be looked after. And that takes effort, takes a lot of time to keep doing this and keep communicating. As I referenced earlier, mental health, brilliant. What most employers have done. Let's try and copy that with cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. And Suzanne and Craig, then just about time to sort of wrap up the conversation. So thank you so much for all the insight that you've given. What would you like to kind of leave the audience with? Suzanne, perhaps from a sort of individual point of view, somebody who deals with the people who are going through this in a very personal way. What would you say to employers listening into this conversation today?
I think, about, treating everyone as an individual is the main thing, and just trying to have that conversation as early as possible. The line manager might not be the right person, but somebody else, HR or whoever, and finding out what they need and recognizing that may change along the way as well. That what someone's most worried about at the beginning, it probably changes throughout. So, have those regular check-ins and be flexible with your approach, really.
Brilliant. And Craig, how about you?
From my perspective, I think that looking at any opportunity to sort of reference, cancer. So one thing could be, if you're looking at your wellbeing activities, knowing that lifestyle habits and the preventative, have you done anything, this quarter, this month, this year around the lifestyle? And I'd probably say focus on things where there is an immediate benefit. So, if you can increase your physical activity levels, nutrition, if you can be more sun aware, you get the immediate benefit in terms of, health, but then you're looking at the longer term benefit of the prevention, and probably looking at your demographics of your workforce, I think would be really interesting. I'm sure that data is available to hand, but thinking about the male, female, thinking about the age group, the profile, and then looking at where there may be some gaps. So, we know that some of the screening programs are targeted towards certain age groups. So again, could that be something that you're offering additional support to those in a slightly younger age, or at least an education activity, or giving people information about how they could do it themselves? Because sometimes I think as an employer, if you can just signpost people to where they could do something, you then empower that individual, and it's their own personal choice to whether they take it up. But to know that the employer is thinking about the options, I think that's where, if budget is limited, presenting options and signposting is still a really good sort of follow-up. Definitely investing in well-being, but I think the conversation is moving to the full package, isn't it? So prevention, support, and then the sort of the support afterwards as well, what happens, and how that individual can be supported after their diagnosis, treatment, and then return to work, hopefully.
Can I just say one thing on the physical activity side? I went to a conference at the Marsden last week, and one of the surgeons actually said that even if you only start exercising 2 weeks before your surgery or chemotherapy, they notice a difference, and it actually makes a difference. So, there's always hope, sort of thing. If someone's never done it, then start now, and it still has an effect within 2 weeks. So that's quite a good takeaway.
That's great. It's great to hear, Suzanne, and thank you for that. And Mark, just coming back to you for sort of final comment is, get the conversation started, really, isn't it? In the workplace, don't hide this. Try and get people to open up, share their experiences to help their colleagues, and then the support will follow.
Exactly. I mean, I think some of the best employers are really good at using people who've had cancer and actually getting them to, if they're willing, but getting them to promote what they've been through and getting them to be open about it. That encourages others to do it as well. So there's often some really simple things like that. It doesn't cost anything. You'll have some volunteers there. That can make a massive difference, and just keep talking about it. It will really change so many things. And just one last thing I wanted to say was, we shouldn't talk about costs, but actually, if this was looked at properly, so over £7 billion a year is paid out on PMI, on critical illness, and on life policies. Just the cancer element, it is the element that's growing insurance costs the quickest of all of everything. So actually, get an employer engaging with cancer as well will also help save money. None of us are doing it for that reason, but it's another good reason to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, all three of you, thank you so much for your insight. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I think the audience will have had some really great tips to take away back to their workplaces. This conversation has been brought to you in partnership with Reframe Cancer by Raiys today, and through our digital platform, on-site health screening, webinars, on-site workshops and data touch points. We help to create the right solution to help you improve the well-being of your people and enhance your organisation's performance. We support the well-being of over 750,000 UK employees. So do visit our website to discover the wide range of support that we offer. Scan the QR code to connect with us, and do follow us on our social media. So thank you so much to Mark, Suzanne, Craig, our guests, and of course to you for watching today. I really hope that this conversation helps you to bring positive changes to your workplace. Enjoy the rest of your day.